Disclaimer. Judge Ron Rangel is providing this podcast and website for educational purposes only, as well as to give the public general information regarding topics related to the criminal justice system. The views, thoughts, and opinions of his guest speakers are the speaker's own and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of Judge Rangel. All rise. You are now listening to Beyond the Gavel with Judge Ron Rangel, educating the public and expanding mindsets. Subscribe on our website, beyondthegavelpodcast.com, or your favorite podcast platform for more of the latest podcast episodes and updates.
Welcome to Beyond the Gavel with Judge Ron Rangel. I am your host. Today in the studio, we have Nicole Clark. Now, she is a business, litigation, and labor and employment attorney who's handled litigation in both state and federal court. She's worked at a variety of law firms, ranging from mid-size litigation boutiques to large firms, and is licensed to practice law in 3 states. She has defended corporations and employers in complex class action and wage and hour dispute, as well as individual employment matters ranging from sexual harassment to wrongful termination. Additionally, Nicole is the CEO and co-founder of Trellis Research, a legal analytics platform that uses AI and machine learning to provide litigators with strategic legal intelligence and judicial analytics. Nicole has an intuitive understanding of technology and is deeply committed to helping lawyers leverage technology to gain a competitive advantage and achieve a more favorable outcome for their clients. Welcome, Nicole.
Thank you so much. Excited to be here.
You know, we were chatting for just a second a bit ago. Now, you're talking to me from Los Angeles, California. Is that right?
That is correct.
What's the weather like in Los Angeles right now? Now, today's date is June the 3rd, 2024. What's it like over there?
So today we have a little bit of June gloom going on. So it's probably, low 70s, but it's a little gray out.
I'm jealous. I was in LA last week. I was at a specialty courts conference in Anaheim, had an opportunity to drive to LA. I did some of the tourist things. Amazingly enough, I was thinking in the back of my mind, it's the end of May. And so I don't need to worry about packing any sort of long sleeves or cold weather things. Believe me, as soon as I got there, I had to go to a Walmart and purchase a couple of jackets.
I feel like over the last year, it has been just slightly colder.
I'm jealous. I was telling you, I've been to LA twice within the last year, and I went to Oakland, California in December. That's where I was born. And I took my mom out there. My dad passed about a year ago. So took my mom out there. We had a great time going to some of those places that we used to live at and we used to go to eat and things like that. And
big fan myself.
Yeah, you're blessed. Now, I live in Texas, so I do got to say it's hard to beat Texas. I'm very glad to be in San Antonio. Have you ever been to San Antonio?
I've driven through Texas a couple times, so not sure if I might have been on one of those. And then I went to Austin a couple times. I have friends in Austin, and I was a big fan. I'll tell you, when I'm thinking about other states outside of California, Texas is actually on my list of potentials.
I'm telling you. Well, we are here to talk about your role as CEO of Trellis. You want to tell us what that is?
Sure. Trellis is a legal data and analytics company. We specifically specialize in the state trial court system. So right now, what you would have to go onto a county court website to try to find any information about cases, we really aggregate these cases county by county across the nation. So really creating a single searchable system for the United States trial courts.
So basically, it's akin to something like Westlaw, LexisNexis, the research tools that people that go into the legal profession use.
That is exactly correct. So when you think of Lexis or Westlaw, you probably think Court of Appeals or above. When you think about Trellis, you think about the trial courts where every case starts and where 99% of cases end.
So what's the difference? How would you explain that to somebody who doesn't know the difference?
So the difference is every case starts in a trial court, and over 99% of cases settle somewhere in their journey from complaint being filed to trial. And if that happens, that's where the case dies. 99% of them, they settle somewhere along their journey. Now, a much smaller percent less than 1% actually make it to trial. And then from there, even less actually make it to appeal, which is the court system above the trial court system. And the appellate courts, that's Lexis and Westlaw. That's really where they've done a great job. And there's a lot of value because that's what's known as precedent, which is binding on the lower courts. What we like to think of for Trellis is it's the trial court system. It's where you'd never be able to find the information on Lexis or Westlaw, but it's where all the practical information actually lives about your judge, about your opposing counsel, other cases, motions filed, all of that information that lives at the trial court level. And historically, because it's so fragmented, it's been really, really difficult to access information from the trial courts. And that's really, what we've taken on is how do we make the trial court system accessible?
So you want to give us an example as to how something like that would work? Let's take some legal issue that somebody would want to look up related to a ruling or decision-making process.
So let's give a catch-all, a breach of contract issue. If someone has a breach of contract issue and they are located, let's say their case is in Los Angeles Superior Court, or they're thinking about bringing a case in Los Angeles Superior Court, they can actually search by the legal issue. So let me step back for a second. If you were to try to access information right now on Los Angeles Superior Court, you'd go onto the court website. And the only way you can search anything, and this works for almost every court website, is if you know a case number. But there's no way to search by anything else. And so for Trellis, you could go onto Trellis. You could say, I want to see breach of contract issues in Los Angeles. So being able to search by legal issue to see how other cases have come out. And then you can go further and say, well, what if I have Judge Heiberger and it's a breach of contract issue? I want to see his other cases that have breach of contract issues and what happened in those cases. I want to see how he rules on summary judgment motions in breach of contract issues. And so you can get really deep on the practical information about your judge, your case, your opposing counsel.
Okay, so you're doing some actual research into what typically happens with this type of case in this specific court.
Correct.
Oh, okay. And as such, then you have an ability to then advise your client appropriately or to kind of say, hey, the last time this kind of a case was tried, and I actually did do this years ago when I practiced law. And I've been on the bench this is my 16th year. So before I came on the bench, I had a jury trial. I had a case where an individual was charged with a burglary of a habitation as a habitual, which means if he's found guilty breaking into this home with all the elements that go into a burglary of a habitation, if he's found guilty of those elements and he has been previously committed twice to the Texas Department of Corrections, a prison system, individually, right? Twice, 2 individual pen trips, then he would be a habitual offender, minimum 25 to 99 or life. I told him in this court, nobody, generally speaking, would ever get less than a 30-year sentence with this kind of a case. And obviously he got more than a 30-year sentence, but you're doing that kind of thing, right? You're saying, this is the judge we're looking at. These are the proclivities, these are the tendencies that this judge tends to have with this type of an offense. So it's another tool in your tool chest to consider.
Exactly. I think you make a great point. And I think what I experienced in practice was similar, which is when you get a new case, generally the attorney on the case is trying to understand the judge. And the way they've done that pre-Trellis is really sending around emails to each other, asking folks may have appeared before the judge in the past, if they had any anecdotes to share. And so we really layer sort of hard data on top of those anecdotes. You can make decisions about whether to settle a case. Maybe if you understand the judge and proclivities, it might actually make more sense to settle a case in some circumstances. So there's a lot of things that can be done there. And it's actually done all the way from deciding to bring a case all the way through trial, where, motions are being brought back and forth between the attorneys. Sometimes writing those motions takes most of an attorney's time. And another thing that they really utilize our system for is to find a sample motion that another attorney has drafted, maybe one that's been successful in the past, and sort of see, what the architecture of that motion was. How did they lay out the issues? What was the case law? And then they can start from a starting place that is a lot further along than trying to start from scratch or looking up on Lexis or Westlaw.
That's interesting because every judge has their own unique way of looking at things, looking at issues, looking at arguments. And so you're trying to figure out what works in this particular court. So we did a little bit of background independent research into Trellis. And you want to tell us a little bit about why your company was created and what specifically was the idea, the impetus behind it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was a litigator for about 10 years and always generally civil work. I did a lot of employment litigation, which is heavily litigated at the state court level, simply because it's where laws are in place to protect employees in general. And as I was litigating, it sort of started to occur to me that we just weren't really utilizing data in making decisions. That percolated for a while throughout my career, but the true origin was that I was writing a summary judgment motion. And for those that don't know, this is a massive motion that takes almost a month to put together and can really win or lose, particularly for a defendant. It's their ability to end the case before trial. And so it's a really big deal. It's expensive for the client and it takes a lot of work. And I was drafting one and I was complaining to my colleague and I said I didn't know the judge. It was a complex issue. I wasn't sure how to really think about it. And my colleague said that he had appeared before the same judge years and years earlier on a similar issue. And he knew exactly the file to look at. And we went and looked in the file. And in that file was a PDF that I never would have found. That was a ruling by my judge on the same issue. It felt like I was just given the answers. And I took that ruling and I used the same case law and I organized it in the same way. And I won that motion, wrote it in a quarter of the time. And for me, that's where I stepped back and said, how is it possible that this data exists? Here was this ruling that was exactly what I needed, but that litigators don't have that as a resource to start with. They don't have that data. And the data exists, so why don't we have it? I think that mixed with founder delusion that, I thought I could be the one to do this, sort of set off, dominoes for taking the steps to try to make the largest court system in the world searchable.
So how do you go about getting all that information? To me, it would seem like you would have to have an independent individual on the ground, every single jurisdiction that exists in Texas to basically pull and extract all this information. How do y'all do that?
I will tell you, you are not far off. It is, I had a lot of reasons when I started the business for why I thought it hadn't been done yet. And it turns out it is just painstakingly difficult to pull all of this information. So we do have to go on a county by county basis, almost across the US. Most courts are separated by county, and we go in, and it depends on the county exactly how we acquire the data. Every county does it a little bit differently, and our relationship with them works a little bit differently, but it is a county by county effort for us. We are now over 2,600 counties. So we are close to all 50 states. I think Texas itself has like a huge amount of districts, if I remember.
Yeah, well, we have 254 counties, and in an urban county like San Antonio, we have 27 different district courts, which would be equivalent, I guess, to a superior court in California.
Los Angeles has something like 15 different courts.
Yeah, we have 15 different county courts at law, which handle a different type of case.
Yes.
And then a bunch of other we have probate courts, we have all sorts of other different types of courts that exist. So just in one jurisdiction out of the 254, you're talking a significant number of cases that are being filtered through. Yes.
Yes. Huge effort. And for us, we don't only have to bring in new cases as they're being filed, but we need historical data. So going back at least 15 years of cases. And then we need to actually be tracking the case. So anytime something changes in the case, our system is updating. So it's this massive effort, both going historical data as well as new and ongoing.
Well, when I was looking at your bio, I noticed something related to AI. How does AI play a role in the kind of work that you do?
Well, we've been utilizing AI for quite a while, and I can tell you where it comes into play for us. We have some stuff that we're working on. So I'll put that on the shelf for a second. But to say historically, the way that we have been utilizing AI is for every court, they do things their own way. This is every single county, every single district, their case types something different. They refer to plaintiffs and defendants with different variations of first, last, middle, initial. So every court does their own thing. There's no uniformity across any of the court. That means for us to say a case is a personal injury case, we have to take the 2,000 different ways that courts refer to a personal injury case, and we have to really create that structure and classify the data so that when someone comes on Trellis and says, I want to look up a personal injury case that has this issue, we're searching across the courts for personal injury. And so that we do with machine learning classifications. Much of our classification work is really AI driven. And then there's other pieces that are AI driven, like the information that we extract out of documents. So we extract lawyers and law firms from the documents. We extract verdict amounts from the documents. We make the documents searchable so you can pull information from them. And so that is heavily powered by AI as well.
So are you not just looking at courts and judges and those decision-making groups or policymakers, but also advocates? Are you looking at attorneys and, let's say somebody hires somebody on a case and they're going, who's my adversary? Let's say it's a criminal case. And they're saying, what prosecutor's on the other side? Who's going to try this case against me? Are you able to get some of their records, some of whether they're efficient, not, those kinds of issues?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. When we think about searching the court system, you can think about searching it by judge or legal issue, but you can also think about searching it by attorney or individual party. So we tend to, in our core data, really pull information from 4 buckets. That's going to be the docket of the case itself, which of course will usually list the individual attorney, not the law firm, but it's a mix depending on the court. And then from that, we have for every case, all of the metadata on that case. Who's the judge? Who's the attorney? What motions were filed? What was the outcome of those motions? So that then when you search, let's say, a particular attorney that you're going against, you can see all rulings in cases that they were counsel on. You can see the filed documents, the documents that they've written. You can see outcomes in those cases. So we're heavily utilized as an intel on opposing counsel down to really granular. How did they position this issue in the past in other cases that they've had? So you can be really proactive in thinking about how to litigate against them. And then we also, so that's on the individual attorney side, really digging in, understanding how many cases they had. Do they take cases to trial? Are they experienced? And then you can zoom out. And we've done a ton of work to be able to look at analytics on the law firm level. So as I mentioned, depending on the county, they'll list the individual attorney, but rarely will they list the law firm itself. We've done the work to match attorneys to their law firms so that you can say, I want to understand Gibson Dunn's cases. I want to see how many cases, what are the case types they handle. I only want to see their Texas cases. I only want to see their Texas cases that involve this particular issue or in this district court or before this judge. And so you can understand a ton of information, not just at the individual attorney level, but also at the law firm level. What are the outcomes in their cases? How often do they actually take cases to trial? All of that information. So I like to think of it as a zoomed out view of the landscape of the attorney in the firm, as well as zoomed in as you have time to go on individual attorneys and the way they litigate.
Every which way.
Yes.
Whichever way you need to look at these analytics so you have the ability to do that. Do y'all look at all types of cases? Do y'all have criminal attorneys and judges in your bank as well as civil, family? What type of law is involved with the kind?
That is a great question. And you pointed out why it's a great question earlier, which is, so Texas has all these districts, and then they have the municipal courts, and they have, right, and there's different courts for probate, and there's different courts for family. We historically have focused on civil cases. When I say civil, I actually mean also family and probate.
Anything that's not criminal.
Anything that's not criminal. And part of the reason that we avoided criminal is simply there are such intense privacy considerations once you're dealing with criminal records. And this was really about making the data accessible And the civil data was, we had the ability to make it more accessible than criminal data. That's not to say that there isn't sometimes criminal data on our platform. When a court does not separate their criminal system out from their civil system, then often that data will come into our site as well. But it's by no means a comprehensive criminal law database. It is definitely primarily civil.
Is there some type of plan that y'all have in the future, maybe to incorporate criminal type cases? Is it something that is so daunting, so challenging that it would be very difficult for y'all to get into? Or is it something that y'all are already thinking about?
We're thinking about a lot of different courts, administrative courts and other proceedings before criminal. I'll tell you, in order for us to do criminal well, we would need someone to come on the team that really understands criminal law. And the court systems, the requirements, the confidentiality rules. My background is certainly in civil data, and that's what we have focused in. So we'd need someone to take the lead on the criminal courts, which just operate very, very differently than the civil courts do. But it's by no means out of our realm. I mean, taking in this data and making sense of it is what we do as a business. So certainly, eventually, I think criminal will come in as well. I just want to be thoughtful about the way that we do it.
I can see juvenile type cases where there'd be a lot of confidentiality issues there. On the criminal court side, we think of maybe child victims or victims of crime who, right? And so theoretically, if you had AI and you have the same complaining witness and case after case after case, then someone can turn on and say, hey, there's an odd little pattern that's developing, something related to the research that you're doing. But it'd be interesting to me to see how that would translate over to the criminal side. Let's do a quick Q&A break. We'll be right back.
This is Q&A with Judge Ron Rangel. Submit your question today at beyondthegavelpodcast.com.
Welcome to the Q&A break. We have a question. It reads as follows. I was recently a juror for Texas versus McIntosh, and I wasn't picked, but I've been wanting to know how it turned out for him. Is this public record? Will I ever know? It's a good question. And frankly, I'll be honest, I don't remember the McIntosh case, but that's not unusual for me. We deal with so many cases a week. I'm looking at tomorrow's docket. It's pretty significant. We have lots of trials. So basically the names sort of blur for me a little bit, but I can tell you this. I always tell jurors at the end of a case, thank you for listening in. If I'm the one who's going to do the sentencing after a finding of guilt, then what you can do is you can go online. In Bexar County, there is a court database that does provide for information regarding any case. What I do is I would either Google Bexar County court records and then look into the district clerk's files. You could then type in a name or some sort of case number, and you'll get the history of a case. It is public record. And so you do have the ability to look up at the ultimate resolution of every case. Now, everybody has a right to come into court and observe all court proceedings. So let's say someone is interested in the case. They go online, they look it up, they see that there's going to be a sentencing hearing next week. Well, they can choose to come in next week, come in through the courtroom doors, sit down at a seat, observe all of the proceedings as much as they want, come and go as they please, as long as it's not being disruptive to the court proceedings, and actually observe. But if it's just information that you want and you want to go online and look that up, you could do that through the Bexar County information system. Thanks for asking that question. I enjoyed answering it. Let's head back into the show.
This is Q&A with Judge Ron Rangel. Submit your question today at Beyond the Gavel Podcast.
Welcome back. I'm here talking to Nicole Clark. Are there any kind of challenges that you would come across that generally people wouldn't really think about when you're developing this kind of platform? Anything specific to this kind of work? Just to break into a business with a new name, with a new product, immediately you can see folks that are conscious of money and spending whatever it is that they're earning to turn around and say, hey, I have Westlaw, I don't know what
Yes.
else I would need to help them understand this is a completely different type of product.
100%. So there are so many obstacles with a new business, really a legal technology business. I have a lot of friends that are founders in different industries, and some of them say they're in antiquated industries. I believe that legal is the most difficult. Now I'm biased, but I believe it is the most difficult industry to start a new technology business in. You are starting with formality as being baked in, as being really core to the legal system and the way that people operate to start with. Then you have tech resistant, particularly non-savvy technical buyers, and that are difficult to reach because they are so busy already. It's the, offering someone a wheel and when they're, using squares to move something and they're too busy to listen. And that really is a problem. You've got people for whom time is money, and they're risk averse to the extent of trying something new that they haven't heard of, that might take time, that might take money. And so there's a lot that goes into building the credibility in an industry for people to even try in the first place. And so I believe that selling to lawyers and law firms is the most difficult industry. Now I'm biased, but I genuinely believe that.
Well, you think about the American institution of justice, right? The American legal system. As a legal system, it's very conservative. It's based on the common law system, which comes from England, and everything is shaped issue by issue, case by case. On the appellate court side, decisions involving precedent, involving changing the law ever so slowly. As a conservative institution, it would make sense that it would be challenging to break into as a new company. And then at the same time, I completely understand the tech resistant atmosphere. First of all, a lot of us that entered into the profession are here because we had those degrees that were not involving math or science. And we're thinking, I'm not proficient at that. I'm going to go into something that I love, like, a career that involves reading and writing and, the social sciences. And at the same time, we're used to doing things the way they've been done for hundreds of years. I mean, just the idea, when I was first in law school and I got a job at a law firm over summer, it was in Corpus Christi, Texas. I was doing admiralty law. My job was to basically walk into my office in the morning. There would be a memo or two on my chair. I would have to look into the books, and it was everything was related to legal research. So I'd have to go into the books, spend a day figuring out a couple of different issues, where now I could spend 5 to 10 minutes figuring out twice as many legal issues. So just the way technology has changed the law is amazing to me.
Really is. Even when I was in law school, they actually first semester would not allow us to use online resources, Lexis and Westlaw. They forced us to use the books in the library. Now, my bet is that that's changed dramatically since I went to law school.
Oh, yeah. Well, so when did you go to law, out of curiosity? Because I don't remember necessarily having access to those in law school. I was in the 90s. I started in 93.
So Lexis and Westlaw are no dummies. They want to create, the next graduating class of Lexis or Westlaw users. So they actually, at least when I was in law school, and I believe we work with a lot of law schools as well, and so I still see this, they sponsor the computer room, the computer systems or laptops. And with that, they really integrate into legal research and writing classes where they will give free access to the students while they're in law school, and then hope to graduate students that will prefer one platform over the other and to tell their firm when they graduate. So that's the way it worked when I was in law school, but they wouldn't allow us to use the computer lab until after first semester. First semester, it was only books.
Got to make sure you do it right.
Yep. It comes from, I think probably most law students today don't even understand the concept of looking up the reporters in hard copy.
But the reporters would use Westlaw keywords, right? Or key terms.
Correct.
Yeah.
West was smart. They became both the distributor and the publisher.
So what specifically entails legal research? How do you explain legal research to a non-lawyer, somebody who did not go to law school?
That's a great question. The sort of rhetoric and industry language between attorneys can be intense and Oftentimes, I think the way to describe it is simply that you have to prove a certain point. And in order to prove that point, sometimes I do explain precedent and the appellate courts and that it's binding on the lower courts. What I tend to say about Trellis in that case is, look, we have a court system where Court of Appeals, those judges, they decide cases and that's binding on the lower courts. The lower court judges are supposed to use that. Now, in reality, do they always? No. That's actually why Trellis is really interesting, is to understand what your judge actually thinks the law is. And it's not uniform across all judges. It would be an easy system if everyone followed exactly the same thing. But every issue is nuanced. Every issue is slightly factually different. And every judge is a little bit different. They're all human. You're human. And so cases get decided differently. And you have to research to understand that information. You have to research at Court of Appeals level, and you have to research at the trial court level.
That's always a difference. I have been involved in so many trials, especially these high profile trials where there's a lot of issues that are very important that come up, right? One side will argue that this particular piece of evidence should not come in.
Yes.
And they'll give you these 3 or 4 cases that indicate that in similar situations, they should not come in. But then the other side will also give you 3 or 4 cases that show why this piece of evidence should come in. And the evidence that I'm dealing with, considering all the facts surrounding its introduction, is always so unique that I could really go either way. And if I go either way, it's possible that I'm going to be appealed as it relates to that particular decision. And it's possible that a case could get overturned. So there's never, just kind of the way the American system of justice works, there's never an exact fact pattern that existed in the past that's been written about that we have to use as a guide.
That is very, very true. All of the facts are unique. So curious there. What happens? What is your process for when, both lawyers make good points, strong arguments for or against, let's say, evidence coming in? Do you have law clerks that do that research for you? I mean, I imagine it's a lot of work. What happens there? I'm just curious.
Well, oftentimes they provide the law. I researched that. Now, here in Bexar County, we're very fortunate that we have set up an administrative office. So we have an administrative counsel, and we do have staff attorneys that work for us. So oftentimes we can communicate with those staff attorneys and say, look up this issue. And so they'll look it up. They'll send us some case law, but the case law is never quite on point. Being good staff attorneys, they'll never really tell you your decision-making process should follow X as opposed to Y. They never tell you that. It's just, these are the cases available, make your decision. And then they're there with you to analyze the situation if that's what you need.
That's funny. The joke at the company here, whenever I give an answer, is it depends.
Always. That's always it, right? And that's kind of how law school operates. When you when you go to law school and you take those classes, your answers should always include if there is a change in a fact pattern somehow or another. And so as a judge, when I'm in those situations, my thought process is always, number one, anytime I'm involved in a situation where I could go either way, my thought process always relates to, first of all, what is fair, right? We have a rule here in Texas called 403. It's a balancing test where you balance probative value versus prejudicial effect. Obviously, a proponent who wants a particular piece of evidence to come in wants it for its prejudicial effect, but you got to balance that to see, is it appropriately prejudicial? Is it unfairly prejudicial? And how does that compare with the value that it would help the fact finder or somebody on the jury to make that determination, first of all? Second of all, I'm also of the thought process that the jury should get as much evidence as legally possible, whatever's available. I'm not one that likes to withhold evidence. One thing I've learned over the course of my time is that jurors never like to feel that evidence was kept from them. And so I'm sure in developing Trellis, you'll get those types of trends, right? This type of judge prefers to keep more evidence out. This type of judge brings more evidence in. Is that kind of the things that y'all look at?
Absolutely. I think those are a big part of it. In civil law, it'll be, motions in limine, which are to exclude evidence, and similar things, discovery. Does the judge hate when the lawyers are fighting over discovery? In general, sort of, does the judge give motions to continue? Do they not? All those sorts of little procedural things that judges do have their own way of thinking about it.
So we're talking about legal research and how technology has really changed things. Are there any sort of ideas that you have as it relates to new developments, new features that Trellis could go into that you haven't had an opportunity to physically get into yet?
There are so many. I still think about the state of the business right now in our infancy. I really do. There are so many things that we have just barely started. The analytics that we do right now, there you can get so much, you can put so much more depth into going deeper on all of these things and surfacing information. And what we have right now, really in-depth stuff about judges and law firms, there's so many ways to go to add upon that we haven't even touched yet. With our data set, here we are with a data set that's massive. You can actually do something with this data set. It's that large. Many data sets are not large enough to be able to really create a model out of. Ours is. The other thing about our data is, because it's so hard to acquire, is almost proprietary. It's public data, but it is so difficult to acquire and to structure and normalize in the way that we have this sort of unique asset that we are just getting started with figuring out how to use this to really help attorneys make their lives better, but ultimately help who? Help the clients. How do we use technology to get better outcomes for clients, to give them more information, to get legal services to people that otherwise couldn't afford them? There's so many ways to really think about utilizing this data and building upon it that we are still very, very young in what we're going to accomplish as a company.
Is there something out there related to juries, something like juries in this jurisdiction will tend to go this way versus juries in other types of jurisdictions?
We are getting started on that. Let me tell you where we are with that. Because it's such a valuable one and it's so interesting. It's also of the technical and resource that take a lot of resources. This is one of them. So we have categorized and classified out juries for California and New York, where we say what were the injuries that were alleged, what was the outcome, and then where we can find the information, which isn't always, but who was on the jury? What was the gender composition of the jury? How many days did they take to decide? Understanding about that particular county and the type of jury that tends to get appointed. And California and New York has taken us a while, but this you can actually look up now on our system and say, I want to see a leg injury in Corpus Christi, Texas. And, what are all the verdicts that have come out? And then we'll tell you the average, the mean, the median, what was the disposition breakdown between plaintiff and defendant, that sort of stuff. But in order to get this data is not It's not clean. It's not easy. There's no platter. There's no, direct API we can plug into. This is sourced out of final judgment documents, out of, verdict sheets and special verdicts and all of the different things that they're called across every state and county. That's the other fun thing. There's not a uniform document where this information is. Every state calls these things differently. And sometimes they're in this document and sometimes the information is actually somewhere else. And so there's so much work and heavy resource intensive work to pull out verdict information. I also genuinely believe it's one of the most valuable pieces of data. So that is to say, we are working on it across the country, and we have started with California and New York.
I mean, I can see all the different directions that you could take, right? Think about, you have a jury panel in front of you, and how long would it take for you to be able to say, for this kind of a case, this type of profession, this age group, this type of, background regarding family, this is the perfect juror for this kind of a case.
That's it. That's exactly right. Yes. Or this is the jury. We went back and forth. We picked who we thought, and this is where we landed. Some of the general information, job information, what's going to be the likely outcome, and then predictive in terms of what the outcome will be, and if there's an award, what type of award. And then that goes back to a feedback loop to attorneys when they're deciding to take some of these cases in the first place. And so there's just a ton that can be done with that data.
Very interesting. Well, I saw something online when I looked up your company before we came on regarding Judge Analytics dashboard. I assume that's what it is that you're talking about, related the type of judge you're dealing with, the type of court. Is the Judge Analytics dashboard that you've developed, is that the first of its kind? I've never heard of anything like that up to this point.
We are definitely there. There was some analytics done on judges on the federal side prior to us. We are the first that did it in the state trial court system. And the reason is federal data is sort of one unified system on Pacer, whereas we pull in data from thousands of individual counties. Curious to you, when you hear company says they have judge analytics, what's your response?
Well, my first thing is, I wonder what my analytics look like, right? Am I tougher on certain kinds of cases? Am I not so?
Yes.
And I think every judge sort of has those kinds of questions, and it's nothing that I think we could really understand. Those of us that work the way that I do, we truly try to focus on the individual issue as compared to the constitutional provisions that apply, and fairness and appropriateness and the balance that goes into being just. So we don't actually, I couldn't tell you how I compare to other judges. So
yes,
it would be interesting to see one of these black, I guess, sort of like the 23andMe, just give me the black and white, how am I composed? What does my DNA look like, kind of thing, right?
And we actually do that. So part of our judge analytics is not only the judges granting denial and that sort of thing, but compared to other judges in the same county or district, and then compared to all the judges across the state, and looking at that. I'm really happy to hear that is your reaction. And that's what I found is actually the reaction from the judiciary. I know when I started the business, I thought, oh no, this is bringing a different level of transparency. What is going to be the response from the judiciary? And what I found is that judges want to see what the attorneys are seeing. They want to know themselves. And this is because of the amount of data, there's no way for them to have insights on this. And it is interesting. Do they take longer on these types of cases? Is there maybe something where they can look and say, I wonder why I rule like that? Something to think about, and look at those things. So I found that judges at this point, the technology exists, the data exists. They say, I want to see too.
Yeah, I spent the weekend with a couple of friends of mine that went to law school with me. One of them was talking about how I recall, Ron, when you first became a judge, that first year, anytime we had discussions about your work, you always talked about, what do the perceptions look like as it relates to how I'm doing my job? Does it look like I'm being reasonable? Am I being patient enough? Am I using all the tools that I'm supposed to use as a judge to make these kinds of decisions? And I don't think that ever goes away. I think judges always have that concern about just doing a good job. And so that's part of that, right? How do I compare? Folks that I've talked to that do legal research, appellate lawyers, those of us that are in the trials that use things like Westlaw and Lexis, always seem to have some sort of complaint. And I'm not necessarily referring to those two companies. I definitely don't want to disparage anybody, but generally speaking, when it comes to these types of practices and businesses, there's always complaints as to support. I was online, I was trying to get somebody to help me with some issue. What type of support, what type of training do y'all have for individuals that want to become part of the family of subscribers?
Oh, I love that. That's such a great question, because I actually, it's really somewhere that we work hard to distinguish ourselves. We have a team, what we call our customer success team. This team is all prior litigators, years of experience litigating cases. When your firm subscribes to Trellis, you get a dedicated customer success that is assigned to your account, and they are there to help. So what are the types of things that they help with? Training, setting up trainings, as many as the firm will take. They have a new person that just started, train them, perfect, we'll take it. We want to get the tool, the tool is most powerful when people understand how to use it, and not only understand the how, because we try and make it simple, but the what and the why. What are other things I can do with it that I might not be thinking about right now? The other thing that they're there for, beyond all the trainings, and beyond reaching out if you have questions, that sort of thing, but they're there when you have a niche research topic that you're not sure how to approach, or that you've done some initial research and you can't find anything. They are there to help you formulate the search, to be there to help you think about it. I mean, we have so much experience using our platform, and we know tips and tricks to get at this information. Think of it as just a resource where you don't necessarily have to call Westlaw like you might have done in the old days, and I'm not even sure they do that anymore, but you can just ping directly on the platform, hey, I'm trying to figure out this. Can you help? And your success reps dedicated to your account and helping you find value, find the answers, and they'll be there to help.
So is the way you're looking at technology and the data, is that sort of becoming the new way to practice across our country? Is that something that you're able to see?
Well, certainly. We have at this point thousands and thousands of litigators that utilize the platform every day. We have 50% of AM 100 firms that use it as well. So there's a broad swath of both individual, small solos that use the platform, as well as up to your, white shoe defense firms. And it's becoming it's starting with setting the expectation that the data is available. For so long, it was, we just can't find anything out in the trial court system. And we're taking that away to say, actually, you can. Mm-hmm. So that's the starting place. And yes, we have a massive amount of attorneys that are utilizing the platform.
Yeah, we can see how technology has really, on some ways, sometimes those of us that are older, I like to think of myself as being a little older. We sort of go, technology is sometimes negatively impactful this way, but it's just so easy to see the wonders of how technology has really improved our lives. And,
yes.
And it's doing some of those great things that we're talking about now. Well, Nicole, thank you for sharing your expertise with us. Are there any last words that you would have for our listeners?
No, it's such a pleasure to be here. I will say, if anyone wants to check out Trellis, they can just hop on and start searching themselves, trellis.law/search. And I always like to search, the president or celebrities and those sorts of things. There's all kinds of fun information on there too.
Just don't look up Judge Ron Rangel. Thank you so much for being here. I learned quite a bit, and it's always fascinating to me to see how technology is shifting our business, our culture, our profession. Thank you for everything that you do.
Oh, such a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you. Well, listeners, we've reached the end of our podcast. This was a good one. I enjoyed conversing with Nicole Clark, talking about technology, talking about Trellis and how it's impacting our industry. Please remember to ask those questions, subscribe, share the podcast with your friends, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
You've been listening to Beyond the Gavel with Judge Ron Rangel. Join us in the next 2 weeks where we are educating the public and expanding mindsets. Head to our website, beyondthegavelpodcast.com, or your favorite podcast platform to subscribe to the latest episodes and updates.